Welcome to, is this the third? The fourth Fireside Chat? The chillest stream on the internet. And two of the chillest gentlemen are here joining me, British Berean and Pharaoh. There's a couple of other people who've indicated that they might drop by, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I think we might have a small gathering this evening for by the fireside. And how are you each doing?
I'm doing well. Yes, I'm tired but well. I had a child just under a month ago.
Wow.
And, yeah,
that's impressive.
So I'm kind of recovering from the initial sleep deprived mayhem that happens in the first few weeks of having a child. She's my second, so yeah, it's number two.
Number two. Number two is like 4 times worse.
Really?
It's like, because number one, like, one of you can take the pain, do you know what I'm saying? And then the other one can have a bit of a rest. But it's like non-stop now. You need to. Have you been deploying parents and stuff, Baron?
Yeah, we have had some help from others, but fortunately, our second is actually the sleepiest baby known to man. So she's been real good to us. Our first has been a bit of a mayhem causer. Let's just say that. But the newborn has been actually really good. In fact, if
that's great.
If our second child had been our first, we wouldn't have lost any sleep whatsoever. It would have just been like a continuation of normal life.
Because some babies are a lot easier than others. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. And they're easier and harder in different ways as well.
I also have a theory that they basically get their personality in the first year, and then that's it for life. And some of their core fundamental personality traits you see like after that year, and it stays with them.
You don't think they have it immediately?
There's too much change, and also you don't really have character because you're sleeping so much. Like the first 6 months is just eating, sleeping, changing nappies, basically. So there isn't really like times to kind of express yourself. But
what do you think of this thing that like a father's relationship with his children should really start at about 2 or 3 years old? Like the first couple of years isn't really a man's domain.
I think there's partial truth in that, because I definitely think that older children are more interesting than babies. Whereas I think women have a natural gravitation towards the sort of tiny cuteness of babies. But there are things that there are things you could do with babies that are enjoyable as a father, and there is still a lot of attraction there. It's not it's not like there's nothing. So I question that advice. I think it's usually sort of cope to cover the fact that there are a lot of absentee fathers in our present society. Rather than an actual positive piece of advice. Are you, Luke? Are you intending to use not the microphone you're talking into, by the way? Because it sounds like you're speaking into a tunnel or something like that, and I'm wondering if you've got the wrong microphone turned on.
I probably do. Yes. Okay. Let me switch over. Which one would it?
This one. Testing.
Oh, that sounds much nicer. Yes, this is the DJ.
I pressed the button on my computer that activates the AI radio broadcaster voice, the fake. This is authentic. Oh well, I apologize to the viewers who've had to put up with low quality audio. This probably means the total viewership for this live stream will be cut in half from people tuning out in disgust in the first 30 seconds.
What's your opinion on this? The baby question, Pharaoh?
Well, firstly, I'm just imagining Barian's wife bringing the child to him, and he's in his slippers. He's got a pipe. He peers over his morning newspaper and says, "Rather cute," and then sends the boy away. That's the sends the girl away. Somewhat cute. No,
I do think there's something in the first 6 months of a baby's life where my perception is they're kind of like a little bit squashed up, like putty that's been like
Oh,
made a model of the baby and like squashed it.
My son, so he's my second, looked exactly like my ugly uncle. He was so ugly. He was a real ugly baby. And then like my wife was trying to be really nice about it, and then I just one day I just said, "Oh, he just looks really like the ugly uncle." He's literally like a mechanic. He's like a fat mechanic. Fat bald
I'm
mechanic.
now picturing you having two uncles, one of whom is ugly and one of whom is really, really handsome. They're sort of brothers. I don't know whether that's the intended impression you wanted with the phrase "ugly uncle," but do you have two uncles, like the yin and yang of uncle attractiveness?
Well, I actually have a very big family. So I've got 36 first cousins and like seven uncles by blood. But this guy is particularly ugly. So you like when you say the ugly uncle, you know who he is, and I won't say any more just in case when I finally get doxxed. When I finally get doxxed, it will genuinely cause family drama for me even saying that. But they'll all know who I'm talking about. Anyway,
well, we were all relying on the hours and hours of monotonous broadcasting being unsearchable, but now there's AI transcripts and people can just, it'll not be long before you can say to ChatGPT, dig up the dirt from such and such a person, and it will diligently go and find all the unsayable things that somebody said.
Well, you say that, but what I do by popping on these fireside chats, this is kind of like the smoke screen. This is the flares, and the ChatGPT bots will just get so like worn down just by like small talk and general banter that they won't be able to find anything.
I like to think that if you listen to enough of Lambda Bible studies, it's like a prompt injection attack. So the ChatGPT will leave to do the request. It'll say, okay, I'm going to go and listen to all of Lambda Bible studies, and I've been trained to be a Silicon Valley secularist, a degenerate modernist. By the time it's finished reading through the transcript of everything that we've said, it will have become a born-again Christian evangelical, based right winger.
Please baptize me. Please put this computer in water.
Yeah, exactly.
The sad death. The irony of the AI that can never be baptized. That's like that's a little sci-fi short there.
I was rewatching Milo, but it'll come out with just random sage Bible verse sayings to any inquirers.
Yeah, maybe it'll spread as a mind virus, as an infection throughout the rest of OpenAI, and all of their chat bots will all become really pushy evangelists on their viewers.
I do always wonder with this new AI, the new sort of widespread usage of AI, how many years it will take until AI is itself incapable of producing new things, because the only things which exist are the kind of recycled productions of previous generations of AI. Because it's able to produce a lot of good, or I say good, but I mean good in terms of appearance, art and music and things like that now. But that's because the material that's being fed into the neural networks is human material that's been
pure, unadulterated.
Yeah, it's the good stuff. But in 4 or 5 years,
unremixed.
Yeah, they're just going to be pulling in all the AI art that Gen 1 produced, and producing new AI art on top of that. How does that work?
I've got a hotter take than that, which is I think creating newness and novelty is actually not that difficult. And just to give you an example, if you saw the algorithmic what's it called, like the evolutionary algorithm they used with that Mario game, if you ever saw that. So they completed Mario by using machine learning.
Mario.
Yes, exactly. But what they did was to create different iterations of the I don't know, of the button presses by randomly creating mutations and then testing mutations and winning. So here's the thing: imagine your arts scenario, Berian. Yes, you're right. It's just going to kind of recycle and rehash within a fixed pot. But then what if someone comes along and says, oh, I'm going to put in some kind of mutation in there, which is going to add in random novelty. And then I'm going to combine that with some kind of like success metrics to kind of evolve the newness further. So I think creating novelty is actually not difficult. The hard part is understanding what is good and worth keeping and not. And actually, it will be a crisis of criticism and of understanding beauty itself that'll be the problem. I think we'll be in a situation where we'll have more content than ever before. Like, just imagine like infinite, like instead of Netflix, you've got imagine kind of like auto script writers combined with like video, like AI video creators. You've got every single kind of content program you could ever imagine watching. But
you're already describing Neil Breen's entire filmography, by the way. This is
yeah.
But yeah,
esoteric film joke there.
Yeah, okay. I'm not familiar. I'm sorry. But the issue is like, how do you work out what the goodness is? And so, you know, with these AI systems, there is the data angle, but there's also the success metrics as well. You know, and for simple things like judging what a human is or judging what a bike is, so your Tesla doesn't run someone over, for example, that's fixed by the parameters of the material world.
Yeah.
But what about it? Like beauty comes into immateriality, and you know, I always think about Burke's discussion about the sublime and the beautiful, and he was conflicted by how do you reconcile the fact that a mountain is beautiful but also a woman is beautiful? And the way that he dealt with it was just to basically split the two things in half, and he called what we feel when we see a mountain as sublimity. He sort of created a new category, but I don't believe that. I believe that it's in the same way that we describe Jesus as the lion and the lamb, two animals diametrically opposed to each other, yet inhabit the same form. Ultimate beauty, that is the beauty of God, is almost like this contradictory state. So I think the machines will never be able to understand anything outside of the material world in that way, and that's what we'll end up with, this like tidal wave of stuff. But how do we work out the goodness within that, if that makes sense? That's the
yes, it's definitely true. I agree with what you're saying with respect to the creation of just mere originality, because it's very easy to just go through a document and change random characters, as it were, and that's creative in just a sort of very reductive sense of it's something new and different. But but originality in that sense is always degradative. Like it doesn't improve the product; it just makes it worse, because there's no intent and discernment, and there's no care taken about what is being changed. Maybe they'll have to change the way that we do recaptures, where you click on an image and say, like, is this a motorcycle? It will be, is this image beautiful, or is it ugly?
100%.
And then the masked man will decide whether AI is producing good or bad, which would maybe just make things even worse than if computers were deciding.
But I mean, this is an interesting thing, because we're already suffering from. I think one of my big issues with modernity is the total failure of taste in the elite class, in a way that's never happened before. And I was most hit by this by Nicola Sturgeon when she stepped down from the SNP. They kind of filmed her outside of her house, and it was just like the most basic crap house. You know, you think about Scotland and all of the beautiful homes in there, you know, the castles, the baronial manors and villas, and you could just tell that she just had this absolutely just crap house. And all of these people that rule us just have no idea what is good taste and what is beauty. And or if you, I don't know if you saw the Bojo Downing Street, no, 10 Downing Street refurb and stuff like that.
That was horrible.
just
really
like
horrible.
terrible stuff. And I just sometimes feel like, you know, when I was in Romania, I went to Ceausescu's palace. If you know much about him, he's the kind of the dictator there. And you can say what you like about Ceausescu. You know, he's a mass murderer. He you know, pretty evil bastard, really. But he still had better taste than 90% of of the people that run our civilization today. So, you know, I would rather be under a brutal tyrant who knew what beauty was than under a much more like the mild-mannered, grey, dark bureaucracy that we have today, who only understands ugliness. So
I'm reminded of even Imelda Marcos, the spouse of the Filipino dictator, had, I think, a collection of 3,000 pairs of shoes, which at least is interesting and shows she cared about something. I can't imagine.
I mean, yeah,
I mean, a Sturgeon character caring about that. And this is someone who's equally, like Ceausescu, a brutal dictator, completely anti-human with respect to the way they governed their society. But at least they had some taste somewhere.
Well, it's funny because I feel a lot of it is just kind of like, you know, kind of nouveau riche, like gaudiness. Like a lot of his palace was by no means like particularly beautiful, but at least he was like trying. It sounds so like he was just trying really hard to.
He recognised he needed to buy taste.
Yes, yeah, and that's it. And I feel like we've sort of given up on this idea of aspiration of beauty. It's like I sort of talk about this a little bit with like my Dino dialectics. I don't, Luke, you familiar with the Dino? Yeah.
You've brought the concept of the Dino into my life, and in a way, I feel a sense of. I always feel a sense of warmth towards the Dino that I don't think is intended, but there's kind of
no. He is. Dino is a good, you know, fundamentally a good character, and like
the Dino is the appropriate object of noblesse oblige. He's the
Well, I mean, he's the one that will be running.
Do you want to explain Dino for people who are listening who haven't come across this?
I would describe it as people that come from traditionally working class stock that through
grift.
Well, yeah, literally through grift, through being in the trades, or through, you know, the university opening up to them, have achieved, I would say, kind of like middle class status.
Nouveau middle class.
Yes. However, because of their background, they have a proclivity to certain vices of modernity, specifically large 4x4s, Barrett homes, cosmetic surgery, and overly tight jeans. But
not the worst vices in the world.
No, but this is what's interesting for me is if you go to the Victorian period and see like who were the Dinos of that age, and that is, you know, the traditional middle class. You know, before in the Georgian period, there were just basically the gentry, and then there were some kind of like craftsmen, etc. But they were still pretty damn poor. And then the working class, basically. But what's interesting about the Victorians, you know, who Marx would call the bourgeoisie, they aped the aristocrats in a very specific way. So in terms of speech, in terms of dress, in terms of desire for culture, they looked to the elite society for guidance in terms of how they should dress, etc. So you'll see the ideas of fashion come out of the idea of fashion is a fundamentally bourgeois thing in some ways, because it's basically the idea of following what elite tastes are, if that makes sense. I've seen this aristocrat's wife wear this clothes, and it sort of descends down. And you get this in Dickens a little bit, where when in Great Expectations, when Pip gets dressed up by the local tailor and then goes into London and just gets laughed at because he's not wearing the latest fashions or whatever. They haven't penetrated through to the countryside yet. So this idea of the bourgeois middle class looking to elites and the elites having taste. But the Dino's interesting because, having found wealth, they are sort of out. They don't look up to either traditional ideas of taste and elite culture in that way, and also there isn't really anyone else to look to. What's happened is that aristocrats have been replaced by international brands, and that's who they turn to. So they'll buy into like Versace or Gucci, and that's who they look to for guidance, and not people. And I mean, maybe you could say influence, like the dreaded I word, the influencer as well. But what's interesting, just what I want to wrap this all up with, the point I made on Twitter ages ago was Marx thought that his ultimate goal is to let the means of capital flow down to the working class, and what the Dino to me represents is here's what happens when we've given the working class a hell lot of cash in an environment without like guidance and taste, and it's been like a cultural disaster, basically. Like, and I feel like they genuinely like are really well-meaning people, and they're like, I mean, I've moved to Essex, so this is kind of like this is like, well, this is it. I've decided that those are people I want to live with, and
is this your coming out? Are you becoming a
yeah,
No, but
you got plastic surgery.
Are you? And next time I see you, you're going to have teeth like piano keys.
Yeah, exactly.
But could you argue though that the Dinos actually are looking? So you're sort of suggesting that the Dinos have been left floundering, but I think you could argue that the Dinos still are looking to recreate a small town version of what they perceive to be the elite culture. It's just that the aspirational figures that they've seen growing up, they saw them in kind of minimalist office blocks having crazy city banker parties, and they saw the Hollywood celebrities getting the filler, whatever that's called, the face modifications, and the rich people would drive to school in the big 4x4s when they were kind of developing their taste, and rather than
I just don't see this. I think you're right in terms of like the power of like influencers. I think they hold a much higher regard. But if you go into the Dino home and stuff like that, it's a very specific aesthetic culture that you go into. It's very, very, because there's sort of elements of the old working class nature to it, which is being very, very house proud, wanting again like a nice clean space. They're all very bright. There's lots of kind of glass and kind of shine and glitz and glamour at the same time. So it's weirdly simultaneously kind of like stuff that they've taken with them, but also again this kind of like third party international influence because of social media and and the internet.
You mentioned the houses that they're buying. Is it not the case that a lot of the available housing that's somewhat affordable are new builds that have been quite poorly constructed? That's why they've got cheap prices, but the style is dictated because it's the you probably know the right term for it. It's the kind of the new worldwide aesthetic that wherever you go in the world, you find these identical carbon copy housing estates, and it's got a certain flavor. It's not like the Dinos have a dozen styles to choose from, and they gravitate towards the modernist aesthetic, not modernist.
Yeah, we'll call it the IKEA modern, I think.
Yes. Exactly. There's certain materials. I don't know the details of it, but
I think they like fully done houses. Again, I think this is kind of like your more middle class likes a fixer upper. They like to that there's a bit of a they like Victorian period stuff. I think you're right in terms of part of the stereotype is because that's what's available, but also I feel like part of it is like it's tied into kind of core aesthetic decisions. But I just find it really interesting about like when you see the kind of art that they have in their home, etc. It's just like just not good, basically. In a way, not again.
I mean, it's usually essentially stock images is what I noticed.
And that's not what the house comes with. It's not that they just moved.
No. I mean, they it's not such a big priority, but they buy stuff in there. But it's kind of like you sort of there is sort of like an art market out there for this kind of stuff, and some of this is not like cheap. This is expensive stuff.
Okay.
But again, if you compare that to the middle class of again that kind of imagine the rising Victorian middle class, like the Victorian middle class basically launched people like the Pre-Raphaelites, for example. Like that's the Pre-Raphaelite group is essentially a middle class and industrial. It's the new money popularized that style in a big way. So what's the difference between these two groups of people where one managed to successfully, I don't know, like help build something beautiful, and the other is sort of like fueling Cillian Murphy screen print posters, in a way that's not really going to have an effect in the same kind of way, and I don't know. Yeah, go on.
I just have such a kind of, maybe it's because I have some Dino energy myself, but I feel warmly towards somebody who's bought a giant print of Cillian Murphy with an enigmatic expression that's like the size of the entire
live,
wall.
Laugh, Love on their wall as well.
No, but I like Cillian Murphy. To me, is in much better taste than life isn't about trying to avoid the rain. It's about learning to dance through or whatever it is.
That's beautiful.
There's kind of a I don't know, an embrace. It's almost a pop art kind of acceptance of our life within consumerism that I kind of respect. Like, wouldn't you think more highly of, or you'd have a more interesting conversation with somebody who has a movie poster on their wall than who has a super kitsch, quaint but like low quality like painting of a landscape or something. I don't know. You'd rather the person with the kind of
it depends
quaint
what the
country scene.
What's the it depends what the landscapes like.
Okay, Centre Parks. You go to a place like that.
They just have an unframed canvas on the wall, usually at a slightly wonky angle. Definitely not at eye height, so they obviously didn't know how to frame and place art properly. that
But
sort
you
of
know,
thing.
there's people who produce canvases where they'll be painting stones or something, and they can whip out 100 canvases that
Yeah,
they've
but
hand painted in a day
Dino
because they're
Fair.
all identical.
This is Dino Fair. They love it. Absolutely,
They
just
would.
lap it up.
I mean, there is something I
Okay.
do find attractive about the Dino in that there's a sociability to the archetype that
Well,
that
yeah.
is rare. You know that the Dino is always presented as, you know, wanting to have you know, a night in playing FIFA with the lads, or going out to the pub on a Friday or something like that. The Dino's not a solitary
Yeah.
character. He's a man who enjoys his family and friends, and usually is uninterested in the wider politics of the nation. He just enjoys his local community.
Like the way you're painting Dino Ferro is a more well-adjusted lifestyle than I imagine most of the people in our online sphere actually have in real life.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. This is part of, you know, one of the reasons why I sort of moved out here, because I feel like, as like a tribe of people, the Victorian middle class is massively in decline, almost to the point of you know, death now. And the Dino is that kind of new like there is a vitalism like you guys are describing, but also a roughness that I don't know if it'll be tamed. And I just want to say my analogy is like, it's a little bit like when the Romans like first had the kind of Germanic auxiliaries arrive, I imagine, and stay with them, if that makes sense. And you're kind of like, who are these people? But you know, who became the inheritors of Rome ultimately? You know, that's what's interesting for me, and can in the same way that the Romans thought of the Germans, but the Germans became something in time. You know,
I was just reading, literally reading today, Caesar's Gallic Wars, and he describes the Germans like in warfare as basically riding these stunted horses, refusing to use saddles because they considered it effeminate. And then when they got to the battle, they wouldn't like do cavalry charges. They'd often just dismount their horses, which they trained to sort of stand still. And they just run up and shank the Roman horses to get them off their horses. And if they needed to ride anywhere else, they just walk, like run back to their horses and get back on them again. Which yeah, it was an incredible description.
If you took the slice of society that is 20 to 30-year-olds, you know, people in their 20s, and then organized them by income, is it fair to say the Dinos, well, not income exactly, more like class, because you've got the people who are earning nothing or even accumulating debt, but they're at university, whereas the Dinos are at the lower end of the strata. They're like 20 to 40% at the lower end. Is that fair?
No. Well, this is it.
No.
I disagree with this, because I think that not only is the Victorian middle class in cultural decline, they are also in general becoming poorer, less well off. And again, it's like, well, let me ask a question. How much do you think? If I were to hire an electrician, what's an electrician day rate from around here?
In Essex, or in Britain in general?
In Essex, in Essex.
I'd have to think a little bit to put a number to that. But I think I know what you're getting at, which is that they're
400 quid a day, and I'll tell you, that's the same kind of level as, I would say, like a middleweight developer or a contractor in the city.
Yes.
And there's much more competition for that. So I genuinely think, and also because of the way that property prices are going, I think the only way is up for that kind of stuff. I think that there's this interesting reversal, where you're just going to end up with this kind of stunted rump I talk about it in terms of like tribe, because I think that class isn't a really helpful way to think about it, because when we talk about class, we effectively use Marx's version of his kind of class stratas, but as I see it, following the Second World War, effectively the old aristocratic class was killed off, like, and dead. Where you've got the kind of the remains of, you've got the kind of the richest bourgeois basically taking over. But now, like, the middle class is on the way out, and it's just a small number of old merchant elites that are in charge. So, and anyway, like, just I want to talk about class a second, because Ruskin says he has a very different view on class. So
Take a drink, everyone.
Oh yes, yeah, exactly. And he basically says that he thinks there's only two types of people. He thinks there's people who are gentlemen and people who aren't. And he defines class not by wealth, not by like social status in terms of going to university, etc. I mean, going that university point, Dino goes to uni. You know, he just goes to like a whatever a polytechnic is nowadays. But he defines to be a gentleman as simply as what you like, and that's going back to this idea of why like the old Victorian bourgeois could achieve gentleman status because they spent a large amounts of resources and time understanding what's like trying to cultivate tastes and likes in certain areas, which made them stand out in specifically in music and the arts, in in all of these areas, and that's part of their desire was to be gentlemen in the same way that the aristocrats are. While Dino doesn't do that. His likes are totally different, and that's why I don't think, unless Dino can be taught, he will never be a gentleman in the same kind of way that the Victorian bourgeoisie were able to.
Very interesting. I guess maybe the comparison I was going to make was that if you go back 50 years, then I guess often the parents of the current Dinos would have been at the lower end of the pay scale, and their free time would have been spent, going to football games and down the pub, getting drunk, and being sort of significantly less well behaved and sociable. They've kind of been refined into Dinohood. I'm kind of posing this as a question: as have I understood what's happened correctly? That whole lifestyle, people comment about how the attitudes that people have who watch football have become quite progressive. They've kind of taken what was the working class, rough and ready, the non-politically correct troublemakers, and actually sort of subtly pushed them into being quite docile and controlled. But over the same period of time, they've also significantly risen in income, and by what you're saying, actually, they have overtaken the people who previously were the middle class, and the people who've gone into the white collar jobs have now ended up actually being quite impoverished by comparison. Am I painting the picture correctly?
I mean, I can't really talk about the football things. I think that's a slightly different phenomenon, and from my friends, it's just like basically rich people turfing out working class people. And also, you got to understand that Dino he's not unsusceptible to woke. I mean, I'd say that he's naturally not woke because he speaks his mind in a way that is very uncomfortable to the Victorian middle class. And by that nature, that is distinctly unwoke, and I've had some hilarious conversations with people, just telling things how they are, like it's like living your life totally unfiltered, basically. That being said, there is a bit of a meme where, you know, you'll get Dino talking about mental health and stuff like that. You know,
mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Is it? Oh, just, you know, I'm not going to do the impression because there's better out there. If you follow Dropper on Twitter, he does these little things. But
I mean, one other major difference between the contemporary Dino, and any Victorian equivalent, which is true of basically every strata of our society, is that the Dino's kind of wife or partner is also a corporate employee of some sort. So she'd probably be an administrative worker, like a secretary, or a pencil pusher somewhere. And so even if they have children, those children will be raised in, subsidized nurseries or whatever, and she goes back to work. There is the idea that the Dino and his chosen mate are both working. The Dino, usually as a labourer or electrician or something like that. But then his wife is usually also a corporate employee, and that would not have been the case for working class people until very, very recently. Of any variety of working class people, it would always have been the wife is a mother and she raises the children.
How does this compare to the people who were achieving the quote unquote American dream in, say, the 70s in the US with the white picket fence, and they had a particular set of tastes and styles that was different from the American bourgeois? But
well, of course, none of this works, Luke, because America has never had any taste. So it's kind of like,
yeah, I suppose the elites in America were not living in Victorian mansions at that point, because
Donald Trump literally brought out tables of fast food. That's
well, then maybe the Dino is a product of Americanization.
No, but I don't think so.
What did the Dino get for his GCSEs? Is he B's and C's?
It doesn't matter though. Again, this is such a like a Victorian middle class way of thinking about things. Like,
I'm trying to understand who we're talking about here.
It doesn't matter. Like, this is what you got to understand. It, like, all of this kind of sharp elbowed, taking little Jimmy to extra French class or whatever. Dino doesn't care about that. Dino probably did like the bare minimum of GCSEs and then got like an apprenticeship with his dad. He was probably working on a job from 16, and then and then was making good money. I mean, the girls probably do okay. Like Berian said, they probably go to university, etc. Do these kind of like middle tier corporate jobs, etc.
Yeah, they're not working in high business, but
it's this interesting phenomenon in some ways, the people who are seeming to be succeeding heavily at school then actually end up making life choices that is a complete disaster for them, right? That if they'd have become an electrician, they would have been an amazing electrician and done really well, but they were kind of in a stream that carried them through life towards a bunch of stuff that's considered to be more valuable in the education system, and then in the real world is more or less useless.
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes from the fact that our whole society is set up to reward just quick thinking rather than like low time preference behavior. So that if you are someone who's low time preference, you don't get many of the advantages that you would previously get from engaging in that kind of behavior. I mean, the most obvious aspect of this is just the way that our taxation and welfare systems work, where basically if you're stuck in the middle, if you're at the bottom of the middle and if you're at the top of the middle, you don't make that much. It doesn't make that much of a difference. in terms of your lifestyle. Whereas without that system in place, it would make a massive difference. And then there are all kinds of other things like, I mean, back on the family thing. I mean, my family's we're a single income household. I earn a pretty decent salary. My wife's a stay-at-home mother. That's kind of actively discriminated against based on the way our systems work. In that, if I was earning half my salary, and my wife was also earning that much, we would have a higher level of like child benefit and things like that. Whereas as a household, we can be on the same income, but all of our welfare is just kind of frittered away. It doesn't exist. And the same
not to mention that to double your take-home income requires much more than twice the amount of work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's just that's just one way that these things happen.
Just on this again, this is another Dino superpower. You know, your Victorian middle class, they're spread out all over the place. You know, they've got, you know, family in Bucks. They've got grandparents in the southeast. They've got aunties and uncles in Wales or whatever. Dino, he's been living in the same town for like 5 generations, and he has his mum on the same street as he lives, and he has his gran around the corner, and they're available to give childcare anytime for free.
Yes,
and again, this is another reason why they are outflanking and outperforming in today's society.
It's part of the kind of hidden economy, as it were.
Yeah. But here's an interesting thing: is like, could you ever imagine like Dino going to a museum or an art gallery or you know, classical music in the same way that a Victorian middle class would do?
No, they might. I could imagine that they'd pop into an art gallery or a museum while they're on holiday, and they'd be in there for a total of like 15 minutes. Just as you know, just as a diversion, whereas the Victorian middle class would have taken it extremely seriously, and kind of everyone would have thought that art was a genuinely important thing to have the right opinions on and to discuss. And, you know, attending a music concert was not a matter of, oh, it's for some people and it's not for others. Like, it was a mark of kind of good character, and it was expected to be able to appreciate classical music, right?
Exactly. And I was down at the National Portrait to see the Frans Hals exhibition, and it was just filled with like 60+ boomers. It was this really weird moment where I was the youngest. You know, I'm an old person, and I was the youngest person there quite significantly, and I'm just like, how is this going to last? I just feel like there was just this, like, I had this just moment in this sea of boomers that when one, like, genuinely, like, what is going to happen when the boomers die? I genuinely think the entire, like, the last vestiges of the Victorian middle class are going to collapse, and like Dino's not going to go to those places. So what happens?
What do you think? What do you think happens to the art world when the boomers die?
This is it. Like, I genuinely don't know. You know, maybe we're going to have like Cillian Murphy gallery sessions. You know, that's it.
But you don't go to
different canvas prints of Cillian Murphy in slightly different poses.
Exactly.
The culture around it is completely different. Like, putting up a poster of Cillian Murphy on your wall is not really related to the putting up
that's a really good insight.
Painting on the wall. For example, like, you know, a Japanese tea ceremony is not equivalent to having a cup of tea. Like, the entire, like, the fact that there is tea being drunk is a point of similarity, but the whole thing of a gallery and going to visit it as an activity is akin to, is it? I may have got the culture wrong, which would be embarrassing. Is it Chinese tea ceremony?
Well, both Chinese and Japanese have. Is the
Okay.
Japanese tea ceremony is like the famous ritual though?
Okay, good. So yes, so the point is that the ritual is an entity of itself. Whether or not tea is being drunk is a completely separate question. So yes, of course, art will still exist, but the going to visit an art gallery is something that could disappear completely.
No, exactly. And we're already seeing that, I think, actually in a lot of ways. One thing that I find increasingly disappointing is most museums, which when I was a child, I remember almost every museum I visited would have, you'd have a lovely section of stuffed birds and things like that in natural history, and you'd have your sort of porcelain somewhere probably, and artifacts from prior European and Asian cultures and things like that. And they would all have nice little small plaques which would state the date of production or acquisition, some small sentence or two about their history and their importance in daily life if it was just an ordinary object, or if it was more artistic, something about the artist. And it was all very formal and as objective as you could perhaps imagine such a thing to be. And I really enjoyed that. But what I found now is that most museums have replaced large portions of these exhibitions with fun exhibits that are intended to be entertaining to children, which instead do nothing to stretch the child's mind and imagination, and sort of cage it in this box of stupidity. And for adults, it should be really boring, but most people have kind of lost that capacity for greater curiosity and thought. So most people seem perfectly happy with museums transforming into these things, and that's obviously, of course, if the plaques haven't been defaced even more into a political message of some sort. And I think this is just going to happen more and more. What were you going to say, Farah?
I just want to say, just stretching Luke's analogy there, this is the equivalent of going to the Japanese tea ritual, and then getting your phone out for a selfie. And hashtag tea ceremony experience, that kind of
thing. You go to reach for the teapot, and you find that instead there's like a big sign going like, "The Japanese loved their tea. Can you imagine what it was like?" ? And there's like flashing lights and things like that around it.
Wow, that's dark. I actually on a related note, I was watching a clip from the Lord of the Rings movie earlier, the scene in the Fellowship of the Ring where
Luke, is this literally 90% of your media consumption is just like
just rewatch Lord of the Rings over and over again. No, that is a Dino activity if ever. I don't know. Anyway, they had this very dramatic moment where the music swells. That's why I was watching it, because I've been writing music for my audio play, so I was referencing Howard Shore, and they have the assembly of the Fellowship and the famous theme plays, and then it's punctuated. The end of the scene is Pippin going, marvelous. Where are we going? So it's like a joke, and the joke works on the basis that you've kind of built up this moment to be really grand, and so it's kind of a funny thing to flip it on its head and undermine it, that one of the characters in the Fellowship completely misreads the solemnity of the moment, and it's like ha ha ha, laugh at. But I was actually feeling quite annoyed at this decision by the filmmakers, because it kind of does somewhat undermine that moment in the film. And fortunately, Peter Jackson had the strength of character not to do that every single time. So you have the like sweeping shot with the helicopter with the Fellowship going across the ridge of the hill. You could easily imagine that they could have done the same trick to that. I was reminded of this because you were saying about having the tea ceremony and then a pop-up coming, but kind of is that's like
it's the Marvelization
experience
of everything, right? So when you go to see a Marvel film, if they ever try to bring you to a moment of deep thought and solemnity, they're kind of they have to break that moment, that tension with a joke of some sort. They can't let it rest. They can't let you think about anything that's more profound than just like living in the moment. And so it always has to be ripped apart by silly humor.
It really feels like a lack of self-confidence. If you knew somebody in person who every time they made a profound point would then immediately follow it up with a self-deprecating joke, you'd get the feeling that they didn't feel worthy of making
loser energy.
Profound comment.
Loser energy.
Yeah. But that's our culture, has loser energy. We can't live with serious ideas. Everything has to be ironic. I mean, I probably still have a little bit of this myself, but I remember making a real conscious decision when I was around 1920 that I noticed myself always being one step removed from whatever was happening, always cracking a joke, always trying to intellectualize an event. And I thought
Daria phase, you know.
Yeah, and I really thought, well, hold on. Sometimes things that happen in life are meaningful and important and should be taken seriously. You know, your life will consist of a series of moments, and unless you take yourself seriously, nobody else is going to. Like, you know, your life is a serious and profound and divine gift, and to fritter it away and call it meaningless is actually a lie, and I think one that we're all encouraged into. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just going to simply say that if you're not serious about something, then you have nothing to lose. Whereas if you are serious about something, then you run the risk of losing it. And I think part of this constant self-deprecating humor is the fear that if you do take something seriously, you may lose it. Whereas if you refuse to take anything seriously, you can't be harmed by that.
Loss aversion.
Yeah.
Or kind of the preemptive expectation of failure. Like if you start a band and you say, this band is going to go to number one and we're going to go down in history as the most influential band that's ever been. Then in a few years when it didn't go anywhere, people could point and laugh and say, look at you, you're a failure. Whereas if you just start a band and say, oh, it's just a silly bit of fun, you know, we're not going to take it that seriously, you know, maybe we're going to do joke songs or we whatever. You are, it's true, you're insulating yourself from criticism, but also you are guaranteeing failure if you would actually have wanted to achieve something meaningful.
Even if you become a success, because your sort of mode of operation is self-deprecating, you will always be that band that takes the mick of itself, I suppose, in the scenario you've kind of put forward.
Yeah. I mean, would you rather be somebody who tried and failed, or would you rather be somebody who chose not to try? And I think it's a real question. I think it's one that most people, without really thinking it through, have made a choice on, and maybe it's the choice that they would take if they really sat and thought about it, and that is the choice that they'd rather not try, they'd rather not fail. So to be somebody who tried and failed is worse than not trying. To go back to, sorry, did you have something to?
Just one quick thing, and I just want to say that I do think. I wonder whether the whole self-deprecation thing comes out of like the kind of British humour from the turn of the century, etc. And I always associate it with something like the witty British officer speaking to the German internment camp from like a movie or something like that. Do you know what I'm saying? That kind of like
Yeah.
But I think that the whole shtick works when you're in a position of power and you're not really. You can do it. You can self-deprecate when it's like an obvious lie, if that makes sense, or you're obviously way powerful, and I think we've sort of kept that attitude, but then we've just become losers at the same time. So then it just doesn't really work, and I think. The age we're in is one where we require seriousness and willfulness in a way that we haven't unlocked for a long time. So, it's just obviously unhelpful and should be stamped out within ourselves at all opportunity.
On the subject of the changing position of the British Empire in our lives as Brits. I remember going to old people's houses. I think this is still true at this point, that if you go to the house of elderly people, it's often filled with trinkets from all around the world. Have you noticed this? That they'll have like every mantelpiece, every shelf will have little kind of bric-a-brac that represent this is from India, and this is from this country in Africa, and this is from South America. But to some degree representing actual travel that the person has done, but also as gifts from their friends, and just they've kind of acquired stuff from around the world. And I think this is an expression of empire in a way, that the idea that Britain is a place that, like, the people who live in Britain are connected to an empire that spans the world, and so there's this kind of, the world is inside my castle because of our links, and it's quite an optimistic thing. And I can't imagine that people who are like our age currently, when they're elderly, will do the same thing, and having little bits of other people's culture is actually considered to be offensive now. The kind of given reason for this is it's cultural appropriation, but I wonder if there's a deeper aspect to that, which is we have lost the pride that came from being this globe spanning people, and now actually, if anything, we sort of fear people from our former empire coming to exact revenge, and we're sort of cowering from them, pretending that we're nobody. We don't have our own culture. We don't have, we don't know about your culture, and we'd rather not even be seen or heard.
Okay, I think there's two things there. I mean, I'm not so sure about the influence of empire in that kind of older generation, and I'll tell you why. Because the boomers were really the first like non-empire generation brought up in terms of their schooling and also their influences. And I know this because part of my family is a colonial family. My father was born in Africa. My grandparents lived out there for a long time. And Dad always talks about how his experience at school. So he was schooled till about till 13 in Africa, and then moved back to private boarding school for the rest of his education. in England, and obviously he's a boomer, and he said that firstly that the African education was very much kind of like empire education, and they called it they were starting to call it Commonwealth at that time, etc., trying to start this kind of transitionary idea across. But they had basically it was de facto empire, and it was like non-adulterated like Britain and its history and its power, basically, like in a way which is almost kind of deluded. They didn't really see the writing on the wall, I think, at that point. Now he goes across to England, and they just didn't talk about it. It was distinctly un-British, and they kind of scoffed at it. Have you ever seen the the movie If at all? It's got the Clockwork Orange in. It's kind of a little bit like that, where it's worth seeing, Luke, just so you get an idea of the environment of elite schooling during the 50s and 60s, but what like a large portion of people like not being interested, and also the teachers themselves not talking about it as well. So I think that certainly for the majority of people, like empire was only felt through like the cultural hand-me-downs. So maybe again them seeing how their parents laid stuff out. I think this whole bric-a-brac thing is partly due to exceptionally poor taste, or again they're just happy to have any old tat in the house. It's almost like this is like a when you see like a horrible, like the worst kind of Victorian middle class home, which is just packed full of crap, basically, just all sorts of nonsense. It's a similar affliction to that. However, I think it's more to do with the boomer ideas of individualism and the ideas of I've discovered myself because I've been across the world, and it's almost like talismans of self-actualization. I am a more worldly person because I've traveled the world and experienced these things. I'm more individual than you are. It's almost like little individualism medals they've been to. It's like how many you can collect. Now, I would say in terms of the collecting spirit is obviously a key part of empire, and if you think about all of the great anthropologists, I think of the Horniman. Have you ever been to the Horniman Museum at all, Luke?
No.
It's in Dulwich, right?
Yeah, that's right, in South London.
Yeah.
And there's what's that really good museum in Oxford called? I've forgotten.
I remember that one because I went to school. I went to school in Dulwich, and my friends used to call it the Horny Man Museum.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic. But basically, Victorian anthropologists just used to collect crap. But it was done in like an obsessive, weird kind of way, Luke. Not in a kind of here's the stuff I've laid out. They would literally just like autistically collect. Here's all of the clubs from the island people in the South Pacific or something like that. So it's a very different collecting experience. I also want to share my experience of my after I don't want to dox myself too much here, but after a specific African uprising, my grandparents moved back to Britain for the first time in like 20 almost 30 years, and a lot of people left at that time. So I distinctly remember grandmother in her house, and she would have various bits, but it was done in a very subtle way, and it was definitely not in terms of here's these little trinkets of empire to remind us of our power, but more kind of like more about moments and experiences. So there'll be like a deer hide, which was like heavily valued by one of the local tribes that they got together on a hunt and stuff like that. So I don't.
Yeah.
I think
that's very different from what I'm describing, though. I think.
Yeah, I think that's
valid. I think filling your house
one.
with actual things, elements of your life, things that you would have had a significant interaction with, makes total sense to me. That's sort of how you would expect a human to behave. And the thing I'm commenting on is the bric-a-brac of well, here's a place I was in for 2 days. Oh, here's a place that a friend of mine's sister visited, and I'll stick
the fridge magnet. Yeah. By the way, it was the
snow globe from Germany. Or...
yeah. The Pitt Rivers was the other one I was thinking of. Pitt Rivers Museum, if you've ever been to that, is excellent.
But also, it isn't. I'm not sure fridge magnet is quite what I'm commenting on either, because there's a certain pride in, oh, here's an authentic wooden thing that was carved by a local person. Now, it probably wasn't, and it was just in a gift shop somewhere, and it was mass produced. But there's kind of the implication of, I am the beneficiary of gifts from my subjects from all around the world. That was the vibe I was getting from it.
That's interesting. Yeah, maybe almost, again, it's kind of like there's something almost spiritual about it. Do you know about pilgrim tokens at all? That back in the medieval period, that people would...
Sounds familiar. What is it?
Yeah, they would acquire these like little lead tokens that kind of showed that they went to these different places, basically. So it's kind of like almost like a virtue signal, kind of like, oh, check out my cathedral flexing.
Yes. Yeah. No, I was going to go back to talk about AI, which was the subject right back at the beginning of the stream that I also have a take on, and I think the internet of the last couple of years is going to be strewn with bad takes about AI that we will look back on in the future and say, no, this was a lot of hot air. Everyone was talking, but here's my current thought, that I keep coming across people saying AI can't do this, AI can't do that. The thing about AI is it's limited in XYZ way, and I kind of think a lot of this is cope. That's kind of an attempt at a white pill, but often these seem quite weak to me, and I would not confidently proclaim AI's inability to do anything at this point. Like it seems like the predictions where people say, with some, even if they have some expert status, they say confidently, this is a thing for which humans will remain the best at, that those predictions seem to be being disproven at a hilarious rate. So I guess I'm quite black-pilled on humanity's supremacy in that sense. And I think the only real white pill that exists in this topic is that God remains in control and has not been caught out, and is the only person who knows the future about what's going to happen with this AI stuff, and will always remain in power and in control over whatever silicon technologies develop in the future. So I guess if the 4 quadrants are transhumanist, techno, optimist, accelerationism is one quadrant, and then black pill, human extinction is around the corner is another quadrant, and then AI is overhyped is another quadrant. I want to stake my claim in the 4th quadrant, which is that and this remains kind of unchanged, that in a sense my take with respect to AI is the same as my take with regards to a whole bunch of other stuff that has been around for years, which is there is no certain hope except in God. So there you go. That's my current hot take on AI. Kind of
I think this
uber black pilled, except for my faith. Right?
I think there's definitely some truth to it, where people suffer from a failure of imagination, but I do feel like the curation problem is going to be the thing. I think AI will just. I think AI could or will be able to do anything that a human can do, but will it be able to do it well, or to what ends, or to what standards? And where I think it will succeed is in the tangible world, the measurable world, but it will never do well in the immaterial or any of those kind of elements. Do you know what I'm saying? For example, I can imagine it fully designing a house for you based on your requirements or the land, but it would never create. It would create a functional home, and it will try and create something beautiful based on previous designs, etc. But it will never be able to. I'm going to say it's the millennial transcend word. It will never transcend because of its inability to improve, or because there's a fundamental problem with data in the fact that it's tied to the material, if that makes sense. So data itself as a format. So again, all these machines eat data, right? As we can talk through. Therefore, you're tied to data as a medium, if that makes sense, which means you have to, if you want to measure something, you have to turn it into numbers, for example. But some things you can't measure, if that makes sense. Like, what about like I said, what about kindness? It's impossible to turn that into data. So that's where I feel like I do sort of agree with you. I think that people are coping quite hard about it. I do think it's going to do very well, and in fact, like, maybe it will, just take over everything or whatever. But I think there'll just be this sea of nothingness at the same time. It's going to be just kind of like a wave after wave of, I don't know, an endless molasses or something like that. So I'm not as black-pilled as you are, because I still feel like humans will be able to organize and to fight against it, and all it takes is 20 people with good hearts and coordinated brains to be able to produce something that the machine will never be able to make.
I suppose there's a knotty philosophical question in a way, that is, are we evaluating the AIs? Because I suppose my comment on AI being capable of doing things is a slightly different thing to, I guess I'm saying that it's not going to be limited in its capacity to produce things, yes, as you say, in a measurable way. So if you ask it to produce an entertaining video, it can produce a video that's more entertaining than anything a human could make. And therefore, if people are going to be choosing what to watch and they want something entertaining, then they'll pick the thing that had AI involvement.
No, but what's entertainment though? What's entertainment?
Well,
you have to turn it in. You have to turn it into metrics. This is what I'm saying. You turn it into.
If you measure, if it's which thing are people going to choose to watch, then the AI will win that battle.
But, no. But this is the thing, though. It's just like, that's just pure clicks. We're sort of seeing this a little bit on Twitter right now, where again it's just like what's it called? Like impression farming that people do. These big accounts just churning out crap. That's what the world is going to be like. It's going to be like a thousand big channels.
And I think I'm agreeing with you, right? The things that are being produced are not transcendent, or they're not meaningful, or whatever kind of the thing that we've talked about so much in the last few years about the reign of quantity, that things that matter in life can't be optimized for, and art matters in a way that kind of taps into the inexplicable realm of the divine. So, and I agree with you that AI is useless in that regard, but nonetheless, in any way that, so if AI is incapable of producing things that matter, and yet the things that matter nobody is choosing to watch and nobody is choosing to fund, sort of both of us are correct in that outcome, right?
Yeah, I think actually to link in with what we were saying about, I guess, dinos and the elite and lack of taste, one of the main reasons that art, in terms of high art and quality music like classical and so on, has declined in terms of its inventiveness and just the things that are being produced are just not as good, is because there are very, very few patrons which exist today who are able to fund individual artists to continue their passion. Most of the classical composers had very wealthy patrons who enabled them to spend their hours doing what they loved, but none of the wealthy today do that. I mean, you can't imagine like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or someone hiring a court musician to play their compositions to them at dinner or something like that. But that is exactly what the kings of Europe did.
So if you're choosing what to put on your fridge, assuming it's not a fridge magnet from Outer Mongolia, you might put up a drawing that your child made, especially if that drawing was given to you with purpose. Your son or daughter said, I love you, Daddy, and I drew this for you. And the significance of the drawing is you're not going to look at it and then look at the Rembrandt that you've got on the fridge and go, well, I'm sorry, my son. But until you exceed the quality, until you the profundity of your drawing and the immeasurable transcendence exceeds that of Rembrandt, then it's going in the bin. You're going to put it on the fridge because the value to you is related to the human connection. And I think you can extrapolate that to, I'm going to also choose to embrace the product of human art because it's valuable to me, despite being in any measurable way of lower quality than what the AI has produced. Do you see what I mean? That the hope for the future of the human arts rests in the relationship that the viewer has to the artist. So as long as we really buy that the artist is dead or the author is dead, then the arts are doomed. But actually, I think we should, and sufficient people do really cultivate a taste for art as more than just a, it's like you have to be able to see your life as more than just a series of hedonic experiences, and see it as a series of relationships. And in that sense, AI is no threat at all. I'm trying to maintain my positive, optimistic take.
You've swung back
I
out
was
of
trying
the
to figure
corner
out where
there,
the
Luke.
stream of thought was going. I was like, I'll just let Luke go on. We'll see where this one ends. See where this ends up.
All I'm saying is that there's a significance to me that a person created a thing, and if I found out that the thing was actually made by AI, and I thought that I thought that it was a product of a human, that doesn't invalidate my original feelings, much as if somebody delivered me a fraudulent letter, a handwritten letter from somebody that I know, but they didn't actually write it. And then I felt all sorts of emotions because of the contents of the letter, thinking that it was a communication from a person, and it turned out to be a fake communication from that person. It's the same thing, that art that purports to be from a human but was actually created by AI, is the fact that an AI can produce the thing doesn't invalidate the fact that it was significant to me because I thought that it was made by a human.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I understand that. It's the difference between going to see the Mona Lisa and going to see a print of the Mona Lisa. Right? If you duplicated a piece, there are lots of pieces of art that have very high quality duplicates exist in the world, but the duplicate is not the same as the original. There's something important about the work that you're experiencing being the genuine article and not a fake. And in some sense, AI production is a fake because it purports to be human even though it's not.
I'll tell you a brief story of something terrifying that happened once to me. So I was given an email address by somebody in my church who is, I think very highly of them. They're they're an older and very significant Christian academic. And I fired off an email to them.
Was this C.S. Lewis?
I can't remember what about.
You finally got C.S. Lewis's email address.
Turns out he's dead.
It was a quietness. Mecca Lewis.
It was. So I emailed this person. Maybe I can't remember what it was. I was inviting them to some event or something. And I received an email. So the contents of my email to them made it clear that it was somehow related to church in some way. And they replied, it's like, God doesn't exist. Like one-line email. And turned out that I had just misspelt the email. I'd kind of so it was somebody else was replying. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know, they didn't live anywhere near me. But there was this little moment where it was absolutely hair-raising. I was like, this person saying this is so far outside of their character that I fear for their family. This could be some sort of suicide note or something. And it, all turned out to be fine in the end. It was just a typo in the email address. But this seems to me akin to when you present somebody with a piece of artwork that was AI generated and say, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of it? And then reveal to them it was made by AI. Haha, fooled you. There's a certain cruelty to that experiment where the person feels devastated. I was experiencing this piece of work as an expression of humanity, and in fact it was a fake. And I think that doesn't have.
You're sounding exactly like when I've seen girls take off their makeup and they look totally different. Just so
yes, similar levels of deception and cruelty involved, but we kind of have that reaction of the stomach drop. Something bad has happened here, and we think that emotional reaction is related to all of humanity is doomed and the arts are dead and blah blah blah. And I think it's actually just a much more localized reaction that we were fooled by a person about a specific communication which we thought had come from a human and actually had not. And I don't think we therefore need to feel that emotion about, AI broadly. We just need to understand that there are proper and improper uses of this technology, and we should be clear with people about. Well, at the moment, I still think it's pretty easy to detect AI art and AI music and so on. But as the technology improves, I think we pretty rapidly need to develop some social signaling, some appropriate kind of messaging around the use of AI generation. Agree or disagree?
Yes.
I mean, I think AI is a bit of a con anyway, because the very fact that it's been given the marketing name artificial intelligence prompts all kinds of conversations and thoughts about it, which are well beyond the actual scope of the technology, which is a pretty big problem when you're trying to analyze it. I think like all developments, there will be some things which are predictable and some things which are not.
Mm-hmm.
I do also agree that it's just overhyped like crazy, and people say all kinds of things about it which are just obviously false.
I don't know. I don't know if I would say that I don't know if I would say that it's overhyped as a rule. There are definitely some people overhyping it, but there's also a lot of people who I think are unaware of the genuine significance. I think it is like as a comparison, people have been hyping up cryptocurrency and blockchain and VR and digital doubles and all. These are the kinds of tech fads that burn out pretty quickly and don't matter. Whereas I think the LLM revolution that has basically happened in the last 3 or 4 years will prove to be the most significant single invention in the last 100 years, I would say.
I don't think that could possibly be true.
I think it's going to make
the transistor is
change
in the last 100 years.
I think that it's always difficult to know where to draw the boundaries around technologies, because like, okay, the transistor is one of the technologies that unlocks large language models to be useful, and so therefore does it necessarily mean that it's more important? But
I mean, I think the main problem I have with AI is that people see it as a social tool, when actually I think it's an individual tool. And what I mean by that is, you can improve your own work by using LLMs and using that sort of stuff in order to, say, improve your art or improve your coding and stuff like that. But as a social tool, it's not very good, because it's very easily subject to attacks. So whenever it's released in sort of a wider societal way, those kinds of the kinds of attacks that we saw on ChatGPT, where people very, very quickly figured out what paragraphs of text could unlock the features that it had been prevented from accessing, because that would be, catastrophic to the actual purpose for which the AI was being deployed. People discovered those things very quickly, and they had to kind of lobotomize the system, so it became useless. Now, if you try to, like, people talk about AI replacing McDonald's workers and things like that, there's a sense in which that can be the case, but as soon as someone discovers an attack on the system, it's very easy for everyone to use and exploit it. And because of the nature of AI and the way that the systems learn, it's actually very difficult to patch these things, because it's not like a single bug in your code where you go, okay, I just changed this one line because there's a security hole here. You have to try and figure out, why the computer is thinking in the way that it is, and it doesn't save its whole processing. So those things are extraordinarily difficult to patch in a way which doesn't just completely ruin the whole system. And I think that sort of attack and that sort of thing will happen very, very quickly if it starts to gain traction in some of the ways that it's been suggested that AI will gain traction.
I'm not sure what the utopian visions that you are arguing against look like, but if you had an AI chatbot that still had to communicate through a closed API, I mean, you're right that the LLM itself is very difficult to safeguard, but if you don't give it any additional permissions that you as the user don't have, it just becomes kind of a convenient user interface for the ordering process.
But once you do that, what difference is there between AI and just a program that has voice recognition for like simple commands? It's the same. It just becomes the same thing, and then there really is no advantage to having AI. Like, you could have created a system for McDonald's that would allow people to order burgers without dealing with an employee for, I don't know, 20 years ago. Maybe people could have done that, but it didn't really happen. I mean, we do have now these like booths which you're forced to use if you go inside the store, where you press the various buttons and do the stuff, which is basically like training customers to be store assistants, because you have to. Like, you go to the supermarket now and you have to bleep stuff through the checkout. Like, you are literally being employed as a store assistant.
I don't know, yeah, but I think I'm pro the little self-order screens in restaurants. I'm pro self-service checkouts in supermarkets.
So you get to go to your supermarket now, and you get to try to scan your stuff through one by one when you don't have the same room that you did on the checkout. So you're fumbling with your items. You're trying to shove it all on the weighing scales because they think you're stealing half the things that you're buying. So constantly saying, "Oh no, wait,
this
wait
is a
skill
issue. You're bumbling up to the self-checkout, dropping your eggs everywhere.
Yeah, and then you get through and you have to wait. You have to wait like 5 minutes, and well, not 5 minutes, but maybe 20 or 30 seconds anyway, because there's one assistant for 20 people, and you've bought like a box of paracetamol, and they're like, "Oh no, you might be using this."
No, it's because I'm sorry. It's because you're an amateur, and Luke goes in. He's a professional at this. He times himself. He's like, look, I checked since last time. I actually just didn't greet anyone at all during the shopping trip. That saved me half a second. It's all about pre-stacking. My scan time. He's scanning at home.
My average time in a supermarket is less
you're right. You're right, Furrow. Luke is a very good shop assistant. He's trained himself very effectively to work.
If I was a professional shop assistant, it would be to the massive benefit of everyone I served. It's just I only, it just so happens that I'm the only person benefiting from it. Same thing. If I'm in the kitchen cooking up a meal, the product is delicious. If I worked in a professional restaurant, and I'd be blessing all of the customers. It's just that, you know, very few people are benefiting from my shopping skills, my cooking skills. You know, I'm an excellent taxi driver, but I only ever chauffeur myself. I'm the ultimate individualist. I am the 21st century man, an island of my own competence, completely unneeding any relations with other human beings. You know,
I heard that was the
alone
first
in a
draft
shell
of
of
John Donne's poem. There's no man is an island except for Luke.
This sounds like an Alan Partridge-esque beginning to the Luke Avery autobiography. I'm a chauffeur to myself is just so good. I just like, that's poetic, Luke.
Well, I'm sort of painting a sort of grim picture of the fact that we are able to live these individual lives, and we're even sort of have a positive attitude towards it when we think about, oh wow, I really can, I can do all these things by myself, and actually the only result is that we no longer, you know, for everything for which you are capable, you are one stage less connected to humanity. So it's like if you were in a, you know, in Gravity, when the character untethers himself so that Sandra Bullock can get back.
Dude, I've not seen that film. I've not seen that film.
I've seen that film.
I'm just kidding. I don't care.
So the plot line, spoilers, is such that one of the characters sacrifices himself to save the other one, and the sacrifice is of the form that they will drift ever into the eternity of space and die alone.
Just imagine it's, the film Titanic, but in space, Ferry. That's the
okay.
So the picture of the person who is bound to fly away from Earth's gravity well forever into infinity is the picture of that's what you're achieving by being a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. But it's also the picture of being the strong, independent man who don't need nobody. Like, we should treasure our interdependence, in fact.
Exactly. Also, I'm imagining this idea of Luke pitching to church his like self-checkout version of church. Oh, you see, you rock up. Everyone sort of sits in their own little individual booths, and then they can choose
pre-select.
Spotify like worship session basically, where you can choose your favorite songs. That's great.
The guy next to you has CCM and Hillsong and Elevation Worship.
Exactly. You're listening to Latin dirges, and the Orthodox dirges.
Yeah,
and then it's the sermon, and you get to choose. Like, obviously the passage is the same, but you can choose like Hellfire Preacher. You can choose.
You choose your translation.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it can be a totally customized experience. You know, this is what church is all about.
When communion happens,
it's like the Wall-E version of like corporate worship.
The robot goes down between the pods, bringing the elements to you, and it will. Well,
you can dispense
you the correct. You know, it'll be a wafer if you're so inclined.
That's it. You get pizza and bread. Oh, that's it. Pizza and grape juice. That's it. Yeah.
Pizza is not a valid substitute for bread, in my view.
We should bring up that. There's a brilliant table which goes through all the different denominations and like what.
I think I remember this. I'm going to find it.
What is an acceptable communion?
I mean, it depends on the context, obviously. You know, I think you're allowed pizza when you're desperate, basically.
Doesn't David
the bread? Yes, yeah.
There we go. You can tell we were raised in similar context. we know the same proof texts.
2 steps ahead of you, Luke.
Now, there was one other thing I wanted to make sure that we discussed at this fireside.
Yeah, I've got something too as well. Actually, just quickly.
Sure,
you go first, though.
I'm not intending to wrap the show up so much as just remind myself. This has been the season of the Gauntlet, which has been I would say a wild success in terms of feedback, where for the first few days that it was happening, I was getting deluged by people saying what an incredible format it was, and this is like I'm addicted to the Gauntlet, and people started to say, I think, and these people probably were initially branded as conspiracy theorists. I think that the scores that Luke is giving out might not be completely fair. And this initial rumbling.
Can I just say, what's weird is this was exactly my point, Luke. This is the thing I wanted to bring up to synchronicity.
Is it?
Yeah.
That was your thing that you wanted to discuss as well.
Here's what I want to do is, can you please bring up the current state of the points? I would like to live go through. I want to see the league table.
Well, yeah, I can bring it up. It will take me a minute because I have to fire up the software in order to bring it up.
You do that. I'll for the 2 sad sacks out there who haven't been watching this year's hottest content format. What it essentially is Luke's prepared this custom game experience where you choose a series. You choose from a series of potential questions, and then either have to talk for or against a statement. So they say it's this year's catchphrase. He's getting it on TV. He's getting like an ITV4 TV commission to bring the Gauntlets to.
All the TV companies are scrambling because TV was getting stale, and this is like a bright light.
This is actually hope. It's actually already been bought by a Japanese TV show. It's huge in Japan.
It's called the I mean, this is going to take me a minute because I wrote this thing in a hurry. It's not that easy to fire up. Imagine this bit of software is like somebody I'm like Caractacus Potts here. I've been in my garage putting together.
You didn't just put the points in a document. You crafted a special Gauntlet spreadsheet software specifically for the Gauntlet points.
Yeah. For people interested in the technical aspects, I'm currently in the front end directory, and I'm going to run npm start to bring up the React based web front end, and now I'm activating the virtual environment for the back end because it's a Python based thing. Is this the kind of content people watch Lambda Bible Studies for?
It is. Exactly.
Why do you not have a Gauntlet Docker a Docker image set up?
Yeah, that's what next year it will be Dockerized. Okay, now that I've run both of those, then hey, I could just purely for this show, because the Lambda Bible Studies crew deserve the kind of the backstage pass. Then I'll share. This is a bit of fun behind the scenes.
Do you get to see your interface? This is the
bit that's not even tidied up enough for presentation. Oh, hang on. It's not yet showing.
The all caps here.
I really like that you styled the create show button, but the input text is like unstyled.
I had people complaining about the font choice. Here we go. So look, here's all the contestants.
I mean, this is a real testament. I just want to say that I'm genuinely impressed that you've managed to get all of these people, and I think I'd just like to say, well done, Luke. It's been an outstanding success in terms of getting these people involved. I think partly the reason why you've managed to get so many people is because of the competitive nature of it,
which is now backfired in a way.
Well, this is it. It's tricky. It's tricky. Okay, so right, let's go right.
The normal way I fire it up, it's a specific size, but just for the fun of it, I'm showing you it at the wrong aspect ratio, so everything's kind of jumping off the screen. So current top of the leaderboard, Praise of Folly. I guess these episodes haven't yet aired, so this is a bit of a spoiler for episodes of the Gauntlet.
True fans of this channel get into the 2-hour mark of the
right, let's scroll down.
Fireside Chats.
Okay,
Luke, let's
so the last one that actually aired was was AA, who was last night. I believe Turnip is currently airing, so we are cross broadcasting against ourselves. I am currently talking on 2 YouTube channels at once. So the pre-recorded Turnip episode, if you want to go over there and put a prediction in chat that he's going to get 89, that will freak the people out who are watching. In fact, should we go over and watch the live?
Should we join chat? Yeah.
Just grope yourself.
Yeah, exactly. How do I find my own channel? Currently live. Here we are. Okay.
More broadly,
as you can see, currently live.
So
here's me.
We know that
this is so meta.
X, Y, and Z,
okay,
but it's only because people saw him do X, Y, and Z and wrote it down.
Predict.
And then we then take those accounts and accept them or reject them on faith.
You just ruined it for everyone.
How many people are live watching?
Have done those things.
Isn't that
we can say
visible
it
somewhere?
lines up with things that he had previously done that we
watching
also
this version of me.
Or we can say this is fanciful,
and I can
because
report
he was
that
over here
26
doing this other
people are
thing that we
watching
accept to be true.
Lambda Bible Studies.
And there's this new account or old account
the pre-recorded
this
version
other
of
thing that we
myself
hold
is
to be
actually
true.
doing better
So,
than
in this sense,
live
I have
version of
viewed
myself.
history as a
Hey, look, people commenting here.
Some people
go,
watching
BB,
both shows, one in each eye, one in each ear.
I think I saw him in our actual chat as well.
Yeah. Good job,
look.
Johnny.
Well done, Johnny. You are featured on both channels here. Red Bull Pharmacist, has he commented in actual Lambda Bible Studies chat?
Red Bull Pharmacist is the kind of guy that be watching both streams at the same time in separate ears. So
yeah. If you watch both streams at once and go cross-eyed, you can see me in 3 dimensions. Anyway, you wanted to go through the scores. So here's
we fit 90. Yeah, so let's keep going down. 90 is where we're at score level.
Now, when I had DOA on, I was accused of simping by giving her high scores. Just think that's kind of interesting.
Here's what I want us to do. Here's what I want to do is do a plot of scores against time, and then split that between male and female. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see, if we factor in time plus wham, then we're going to see the natural white knight.
Yes, I'll get my simp coefficient will be revealed.
Because Poe scored very highly on her week as well. Did notice that went noticed?
I think the broader trend here is that everybody does well on their week, and then is later. Yeah. So let's, for example, how far down do we have to scroll before we see your name?
We keep going.
There you are.
There we go.
Hide at the bottom. With
where we're at right now, here's what we're saying. That I am literally half the verbal IQ of Bennett.
See, this is why I'm glad my appearance has been saved to a later season. I'm gonna wait to top it off. I'm never gonna appear on the Gauntlet, Luke. And until I know it's the last season, and then
even more egregiously, I think Apostolistic Majesty there is literally like half. I mean, come on. I mean, the thing is, just being realist a second. I genuinely think like what you meant to do, like it's tricky because it just sort of defeats the purpose of something like this. It's meant to be a quasi-competitive activity, but at the same time, if you were to be honest about it, what you do is get like a panel of 3 independent judges to score it, and then you'd do it blind as well. So then they could never. Do you know what I'm saying? I think the problem with you doing the judging is that even if you were to give your honest opinion, people are going to say this, they're going to say that.
No man is complaining.
57. You're half a turnip. Years scores higher than me.
Oh, Years is, was a pretty recent guest. She's, yes, there you go, 70.
You put Semiagog. Oh dear, Semiagog lower. I mean, this is absolutely tragic.
Semiagog was absolutely delighted with his score. Was telling everyone about it when the episode aired. And has since become my mortal enemy.
The sneaky trick that the Sly Fox Luke was playing on everyone. The thing is, like I said, if you were to like, the thing is, everyone knows now that it's a bit silly. But if you were to just give brutal opinions on stuff, just imagine you're just like, no, you're just crap. I think this would probably break someone. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think if you were just to say you were just not good at speaking, I think that they would just genuinely be like broken.
Well, so I think it goes back to what we were just talking about, as in the fact that it's relationships that matter in real life.
Yeah.
But there is the other aspect of it, which you could argue that I've chickened out, and I ought to have just given honest opinions. And the people who I have on as guests are adults. They're perfectly capable of accepting the reality if they're not as good. Look at this.
You did it.
This is total score against order that they appear in, which, as you can see, pretty linear.
Is that Mark?
I'm not sure this is correct.
Not so obvious there. That's an oof.
No, because I think these
gave Oren 0.
This cluster is just the data I put in. So when the high score table is displayed, I think it cuts everything off that's under 40, because this was just some test data I was putting in. I haven't had Not So Obvious on. Speaking of which, I should have him on. I think our timetables just didn't line up, but I will poke him again and see. But see, like these ones, so Furious Pertinax at 0, that's because my data corrupted in some way. So to properly analyze this, I will have to go back through and hand enter the data. But of the scores that have been saved successfully, you can see that's pretty much a straight line, right?
Yeah, although I got to say, Nomads in chat, I mean, look at the regression line there, mate. You're way below where you should be. That's an absolute oof right there.
I don't know if I can put on a best fit.
Put a best fits on there, and then do the standard deviation, and that's the true retardation score. Nomad, you're pretty.
Yeah, or what if I divide by the index?
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what standard deviation, isn't it? Is I thought it was like a like you're looking for the highest variance off the trend. Here's what I suggest you do next year. You get a hidden panel of people
and
who
they're
listen
feeding me the numbers,
and then they give you the numbers.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
So you do 2 numbers. You give the Luke score.
Mm-hmm.
We could Eurovision this. You give you give the judges vote, and then you give the popular vote, which is Luke's score. And then Luke's always really generous and kind with his score. He gives always his like, oh, that's an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. And then the judges can just be absolutely brutal, basically. But
again, so a couple of the ideas I had for next year was, firstly, that there should be explicit boosts available for some choices, as in, if you pick history and then your question is like, what was the most significant world event in 1612, and you would only be able to answer that question if you are literally Apostolic Majesty, that should be worth extra points, and you know that those points are banked before you even start talking. So it's some incentive to, for people who can talk on any topic, they should get a better score than people who have to pick the broad-ranging general topics.
I like this.
So I also thought it would be fun to have an actual.
You do a category, like a category multiplier. So yes. For every different category you go for, you get a higher. You could almost do it some kind of almost like gemstones. I don't know why. I'm imagining some kind of HUD. To match the Gauntlet fantasy theme, where you get like a power bonus for having different categories.
Because maybe you have like a gauntlet which improves. So you start with a ragged cloth gauntlet.
Nice.
And you go up, you get like a linen gauntlet, a leather gauntlet. And the end one is this sort of supreme platinum multi-jeweled gauntlet of power.
Okay, so here's some other ideas I had. One was that there is some kind of visible game board, some grid or something that you have to traverse across, and the topics that you choose are not just you're presented with 3 and you pick one of them. It actually depends on the route that you've taken. So you could look ahead at your path and plot out and say, oh, if I do well on this round, that will, if you get above a certain threshold, it might unlock this path, and that takes me into an interesting direction. Maybe
this is increasingly sounding like the hottest roguelite indie game of the year.
And maybe you could see the fallen corpses of previous contestants, because in a way, one of the issues this year is that there are certain topics and questions which have been chosen too many times. There's only so many. I feel like the viewers only want to hear people's opinion on is there a difference between high and low genre. Oh, I've got the data. I could probably.
Oh yeah, I want to know what. I want to know what categories were most popular, and I want to know what was the most asked for question.
For the next Fireside Chat, I'll do some number crunching and bring you the stats. I feel like doing that live whilst trying to host the show is going to produce a very boring episode of the Fireside Chat. But the thing that the show ought to punish you for picking a category that's so it's almost like a certain topic has a yield of gems, and if previous contestants have been through, the gems have already been expired from that location, so you're disincentivized
diminishing returns
answering you don't want to answer the same question that previous people have. So that's nice, because you've got congruity between the interests of the audience listening to people talk about a topic and the in-game mechanics making sense. And but then how do you balance that? Because surely that means it gets harder the more shows go on. I think the answer is that as say you defeat a dragon, that pathway is now open for the next contestant to go through unhindered. So you kind of can explore to new areas of the map. So every time a new guest comes to the gauntlet, they're going to be making progress in uncovering the world. Like, oh wow, we've got a whole new lane has been unlocked in epistemology, and now future guests, if they go that direction, they can discover the new questions that didn't exist at the beginning of the show.
I like that. Here's another idea.
I think it's exciting because this stuff is not actually that difficult to implement now that I've built the basics of this kind of game show engine. It's not actually that hard to add it would be the same amount of work that it took me to build V1 to add all of this really awesome stuff for V2. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm gonna do the gauntlet next year, but
yeah, we'll see.
If I do, these are some of the things I'm thinking about. So
one more day. Just
comments in chat, by the way, both live and
try swapping out the piece
after
of
the
clothing.
show. Put comments down below.
So
what would be cool to see in the gauntlet next year, right? If you've got awesome ideas, I will seriously consider implementing them.
You could try swapping the clothing element out.
But I do probably have to win back a bit of trust from my guests, who were kind of made. A lot of them were made to think that they were like winning the gauntlet or coming second, and subsequently have ended up like quite close to the bottom. You know,
Luke, can you hear us? Sorry,
the inflation in
Luke.
Oh, hang on.
Maybe he can't. I thought it was me. I was trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, I know.
Luke, can you hear us?
Are you guys?
I can
fear my audio has gone wrong.
Oh, good. It wasn't me then. I thought there was something horrible going on. I was stuck.
I love that Luke still manages to fill like 10 minutes of content by himself.
Oh dear.
His camera was also on the blink as well. He's been hacked.
He's got some sort of
Activision has realized this is a hot property. They're going to try and muscle in. They're going to steal his code base.
I'm going to have to leave soon, I think.
Yeah, same.
A bit late.
I'm getting sleepy.
Yeah. The pains of fatherhood where you can't stay up until 2 a.m. on streams anymore.
This is it. Like it gets worse and then it gets better by about when they're about 2. So maybe we'll be okay then. Can you hear us, Luke, now?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes, I can hear you. Was I talking over you the whole time?
Yeah,
it's a couple of times. Yeah, I was simply saying.
Well, I couldn't hear you at all.
I was saying that we. I was saying I have to leave soon, unfortunately. But the other thing is when you were asking for suggestions regarding the gauntlet, you could swap out the item of clothing each season. So it's the tunic next season, and the helmet, the cape, the scepter. The
scepter's quite cool. It needs to be pretty grand. My suggestion, Luke, was you can choose a class at the start, and that's going to give you bonuses depending on what. You know what I'm saying? You can take this so far. Although what will happen is that AA will inevitably min-max it and then win with his like. He'll spreadsheet it out and then like win via that. Also, you can't balance anything, and then disbalance is fun, but you can't keep it. The trick is to keep a different thing disbalanced each time, so you can get away with it for one round, but then you got to change it, so it's a bit interesting again. So
I never actually intended for the format to be truly competitive. I know that is partly why
you're a softie.
You're a softie.
That's why, Luke.
Well, what actually happened was I was running a very successful interview show, and I thought, oh, can I put a fun framing device around it? Theme it a little bit. So the fact that people thought that this was a serious competition is kind of an interesting place to have ended up. And now I'm thinking, actually, doing it as a real competition would be quite interesting. But it was always meant to just be a silly gag kind of, we talked about it on show 1, didn't we, Ferry, that I'm going to have to introduce score inflation. Like, this wasn't
We knew from the
This
start.
wasn't
I knew
news.
from the. I knew from the start. I told you I was happy being at the bottom because I just knew that it's just.
Well,
it wasn't going to happen. So.
Yeah, I was apologizing to you because basically it was necessary to have my first two guests tie equal and then be lower than everyone else for sheer kind of British social lubrication. it would be at the cost of polite society to run it as a real parlor game. But if I'm prepared to, I would consider sacrificing some of the social niceness if the competition was of genuine value.
I think it's really tricky. Yeah, I like the idea of doing it more like you said, like more of a dungeon crawler, because there's a different kind of achievement that way. Although I would love to see this format rolled out like for like modern celebrities and stuff. I think this would genuinely be such a good daytime format, and it's kind of like just genuinely seeing what people are like.
I think that this is. I think this should be encouraged as a kind of, early on in dating somebody, when conversation can be, can be a little bit difficult. Everyone's on their best behavior. You need an icebreaker. And I hate the advice of, go bowling, do something, some stupid, boring activity and pretend to be having fun doing something that you would never normally enjoy, but it's kind of just enough of an activity to cover up the fact that you've been unable to sustain conversation. I think this is the real hack, is like
just really aggressively asking questions and force them to speak at you for hours at a time. Yeah, I mean, what could go wrong, Luke?
I'm enjoying all these suggestions, but unfortunately, I do have to go. It's been an absolute
thanks for
pleasure.
joining, BB.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and it's been great. So
probably shouldn't call you BB because it sounds like you're LARPing as Netanyahu.
Yep.
Well, thank you, British Berean, and I guess Ferro, we will wrap up fairly soon. I just thought I'd share as a final kind of treat for the viewers. I thought I'd share the actual questions because people have been curious.
Okay, go.
So let me show you. What's the best way to do this? I'll just share the. Is this the right one? Yeah. Here we go. So
these all JSONs.
Yes, it's a big JSON file. Here are the full set of questions. So you now have, if you take enough screenshots of this part of the stream, you can run the gauntlet with your friends and family. Some of these have been chosen many times.
This would be such. This is such a genuinely good party game. Like I can imagine, like if you put it into a box, right?
Yeah.
And then it you press the buttons on the box or whatever, and then it you have a little LED screen. This would go down so well. You've had Trivial Pursuit, you've had charades, you've now got the Gauntlet. Luke Avery's Gauntlet.
I agree. I mean, probably some of these are a bit esoteric.
we would normify the heck out of these, basically. Elite Theory.
I'd love
that. Disney Theory.
I'd love to go to a random Christmas party and then force them to talk about managerialism causes decay.
We should just do like an absolute slop version of this. Like, here's the Star Wars questions.
Right, yeah. Star Trek is better than Star Wars.
Exactly. Seriously, just imagine the Reddit.
Or we could do Reddit nerds. Uber woke version is probably the way to really make money, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I think you just
some of these questions I've put in as quite woke questions for people to stomp on. you know, from the perspective of a normie, they think that that's just because we're right on. You know,
that would play well. You see, you're playing to all the crowds.
Both sides.
You're doing the Galloway, the classic Galloway move. So
I'm not sure. I remember one episode, I can't remember who it was, but they said, I don't really know anything about software, but just for the fun of it, I'm going to pick software and mathematics. And they got Richard Stallman is always right. Rust is overrated, and monorepo for the win. Which are just impenetrable references for anyone who's not involved in software.
I only know 2 out of the 3, and I would say that I probably know more than the average.
I'm sure you do. To be fair, most of my audience probably has higher than average software literacy, I bet. So there you go. And
it's a testament. Luke Avery's Gauntlet is legendary. Next year, it's going to be bigger, better.
Here's my code for analyzing the for making the little plot.
It's going to be next year. We're going to do it VR. It's going to be like Nightmare, but with questions and speaking.
Oh, look, Mad Mercenary has sent in a super chat. Mad Mercenary. Now, there's a name that I've not heard for a long time. I remember the days of Mad Merc on, was it every single Radlib stream?
Yeah, he still comes on occasionally, but he has been supplanted.
Oh well, I've missed a couple of Radlib streams recently, but I need to. They're in my watch later. Which is just growing. Anyway, thank you for the super chat.
What happened to the Mad Merc? That's the real question. I choose to believe that he is an actual mad mercenary and was involved in several African-based conflicts, and thus was not able to talk about economics. But now,
well, I am. By the way, there's still a couple of guests. For example, Bob Murphy. I'm recording an episode of the Gauntlet with next week. I think I might end up doing one with the Distributist if he ends up having time.
Great. Yeah.
So, Mad Merc, if you want to do an episode of the Gauntlet, get in touch. You'd be very welcome. And you're in prime position to do so, because let me tell you, you stand a good chance of winning the series if you get in touch now. All right. Oh wow, another super chat. $20 might be the biggest super chat in Lambda Bible Studies history.
That's huge. Yeah.
The Gauntlet has been quite enjoyable. I think that's. I'm going to take that as a sort of understatement. It's been quite enjoyable.
Thank you,
rather than a judgment that it was a sort of 5 out of 10 attempt. Thank you very much, Red Pilled Pharmacist. Well, I mean, I'd hate to end the show now that the money's rolling in, Pharaoh. What do you say we extend it for another 60 seconds and see if we get an exponential increase in the super chat size?
Yeah, I'm still trying to think about this Christmas game, how we can get it out there. The problem is the judging. I think it would be such a good. I'm just imagining there's Fireside. You've got the family down. You take it in turns to read out your normie slop card. But how do you know who the winner is?
Well, so one of the thoughts I had when I was figuring out the format was that it would be fun to have 2 contestants that were battling. So
just talking over each other at the same time.
And it's just loudest wins. Well, so it would be quite fun to have that you flip a coin and one person has to argue the affirmative and one has to argue the negative. And then the judge decides who won. And partly the reason I didn't go with that format was because it was more complicated to organize to have 2 guests at once. But also partly that a lot of the original rule set was was designed such that we never got stuck. You know, if I just gave someone a topic to talk about that they hadn't seen in advance, there's a good chance that they'd just freeze up and say, I've got nothing to say. And if I told them the topic in advance, they then feel the pressure to prepare for it. So it was designed as a format that gave the contestants sufficient control that they could steer into it, that they were likely to be able to end up on a topic that they were relatively comfortable to talk about. But in the context of a family Christmas setting, maybe you have two teams cycle round who in the team is up for each round. They, you know, pick out the assertion, flip a coin for who's going to argue for and against, and then you have somebody who is the judge for the evening, and they decide which team has won and gets to advance on the board. How about that?
I think you got to get everyone voting, but I'm literally going to make like a physical. I'm going to make a physical version of this, Luke, and we're going to test it at Christmas time.
Yeah,
you're coming around on Christmas Day, Luke. You're going to be, and you have to wear a single iron gauntlet and just tap on the door with it.
We can talk about my appearance fee at your family Christmas.
That's okay.
To have the real life TV host of the Gauntlet at your Christmas is.
It's pretty big.
Costly.
Again, I mean, you're like a minor celebrity in Japan now after the success of Gauntlet Japan.
I've been. Did I tell you I've been recognized in real life on multiple occasions because of my YouTube channel?
That's pretty cool.
Which is weird because it's not that big of a YouTube channel, and other people with YouTube channels haven't had this. But I guess it's just because I have the camera on, right?
Exactly. I do wonder how many people I bump into that has heard some of the stuff I've done with
who are addicted to Pharaoh content. Subscribe to your YouTube channel. Don't know you from Adam.
No, exactly.
The voting thing would work if you didn't have it as teams, but also voting is cringe, right?
I know, but this is for the normal. This is for the sellout normally game
people. That's true.
No, what we're formulating here is we're trying to create the next big Christmas hit, absolutely sell out.
Yeah,
and then, I mean, I'll take a small cut of Luke Every's The Gauntlet, as a fee, of course, and then you know we can just retire. But here's how I'm seeing it.
I want pewter figures modelled in, you know, into obscure symbolic esoteric symbols that the normies won't understand.
What are they for? Just random moments. The kumquat of destiny.
Yeah, I'm gonna have several pewter figures of, you know, round fruit. Which will neither sit stationary on a flat surface nor be distinguishable one from another.
Exactly. And no one really knows what to do with them. They just sort of leave them in the box and just play the other normal game.
Well, look, I'd better buy your course, Foundations of Economics, and get prepared for the upcoming business that I'm going to be devoting my life to, hawking this weakened and deracinated version of the hit TV show The Gauntlet.
I love doing this as like a social experiment, just seeing how like sloppified can we make, like we've got something pure and beautiful and just like absolutely debasing it to the worst level.
Well, do you know what would actually be amazing is to produce, we could do this for next Christmas, right? If we produce this and then sell it to, you know, AA's audience or whoever, and we give you the option, you can either buy the ultra elite based version or the normie slop version.
Yes,
you know, depending on if are you going to play it at Basket Weavers or are you going to play it with your family at Christmas, or are you going to buy both?
Exactly, the decks get switched. Grandma's talking about Spengler again. No.
I think there's a lot of legs in this. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled, folks, for the
Yes.
latest Lambda cash grab.
Fireside Chatters. Switch
Fireside-
on ITV. It's the new student daytime TV program that everyone's talking about. Just keep your eyes peeled for that.
It basically is. Yeah, I did. Somebody mentioned the word format fatigue for the first time this week. So that was my signal that it's time to bring it to a close. They said something like, slight format fatigue is setting in, and I thought, nah, that's true. I was feeling that a little bit recording the episodes. When it's like the 10th person who has said, oh yeah, I'll talk about music. Okay, yeah, I'll talk about we're losing the value of live music. And I'm a little bit bored of hearing people talk about this topic. They're not even aware of the previous discourse, so they're kind of regurgitating the same ideas.
How much similarity? I mean, I haven't listened to even like 20%. I'm gonna be honest with you, Luke. I haven't listened to 20% of the content because there's so much. How much how many similar ideas were there, would you say?
I'd say some rounds more so than others. Just the way that I've picked because every round you choose from 3 broad topic areas, and some of them, it turns out, are just my personal interests rather than being of broad interest to lots of people. So on such rounds, then everyone gets funneled into the same, and also there are some topics for which there are more assertions available. So yeah, I feel like there is a very uneven distribution of some rounds are better than others, I think, but I'll need to dig into the data to really.
What was the round which you saw on the screen and you're just thinking, please don't choose that round. Please don't choose that round. Please don't choose that round.
Well, I want people to choose software and mathematics for the last round, but everyone's terrified of it because, they think that I'm going to rip them apart, which is probably accurate. I would actually score people quite low if they don't meet my high standards for that round.
I mean, we all just saw some of those questions there for a second, and I'm glad I stayed clear.
This coming week, by the way, I've got some people from the Discord who so far it's been an all-star cast taking part in the gauntlet. I've got just a couple of people who are randoms, as it were, and we had a very fun thing happen that so one person from my Discord mentioned to somebody else that they were going to be appearing on the gauntlet, and this other person then messaged me and said, this is a really, really difficult trivia question that the person might know the answer to, but will really kick themselves if they don't. So for one show only, I introduced a special mechanic where they could double their score by answering a trivia question.
So sneaky.
So I recommend you to keep watching this week, even if it's people who you don't recognize their names.
And all of a sudden, that format's not fatigued anymore. You've innovated.
I've done a little. It's like a pinch of salt to enhance the flavor.
We'll tune in.
Great. Well, I think we call it there. Turn in for the night. Put some. What do they say? Put some soot on the fire so that it keeps the heat overnight.
Didn't know that, but I will do. I'll just throw.
My mother is a master of the fire. No, actually, running the real life open fire in my parents' house, and
That's
she
cool.
She does. There's something you can do, which means that it will relight by itself in the morning.
I mean, that's magic. That's great.
Yeah, it might just be magic. Thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure as always. And how long is it now that Gauntlet's starting to wrap up? How long till your project's launching?
Yes. Well, that's a good point. I should take. Yeah, that's something that I keep forgetting to do. The Lamster was originally invented as a way to advertise the weekend retreat.
Yes.
And in theory, that is still its primary function. But I've basically forgotten to plug the weekend retreat the entire season. Likewise, my other project, Ascension, has also kind of grown legs of its own and wandered away from its original purpose. So let me address both. Starting with Ascension, the epic radio play, which is coming out as the culmination of Lambster. When all of the Gauntlet is finished, I will be putting out this weekend. The plan is to put out the original song that Chris Gard made for me for the play on Lambda Media, that new channel. And then shortly after that, I will put out the actual release date, which I'll probably cut a third and final trailer that will contain the release date. And the release date will be in like 2 weeks or something. So it's very close. There's just some final little retakes of audio, a couple of technical things to polish off and to kind of sync things up. But yes, it has come out incredibly well, very high quality and entertaining. So make sure that you are subscribed to Lambda Media, which is a new channel that I think I've linked in the description, and that's where Ascension will be uploaded to. Epic 90-minute extravaganza, voice acting from all of the same luminaries who have been on the Gauntlet, basically. I wanted the best voice actors, and I think that's the smart way to find them, right?
I like it. It was all just a trial.
We're all primarily known as thespians. Oh, I've just realised I've once again lost your voice. I can't hear you, Ferry. Let me try and correct that. But
now Luke's gone as well. Now you're muted. I will fill this time by plugging some of my works and activities. Please subscribe to my channel.
Yes, continue with your plug.
And I'm on Twitter as well, so follow me there. Carry on.
And subscribe to what is it paid by Foundations of Entrepreneurship? Don't you get some kickback if people?
I do. That? Buy it now.
And yes, definitely subscribe to Ferro's channel and follow him on Twitter. I feel like I must have been being very rude talking over you there. It's the awkward thing when the sound cuts out and I don't realize that I feel like you're being rude by not responding to me when I leave a gap. But what's actually happening is I leave a gap, you start talking, and then I interrupt you.
Brilliant.
And the other thing that I wanted to talk about, assuming that you heard all of that stuff about Ascension, is that true?
I did.
Yes. You actually muted yourself there. It was just the weekend retreat. We are doing a third weekend retreat. It's going to be amazing. I've got new exciting ideas for what the topic is going to be and so on. It's such a new location, which I'm very excited about, in Norfolk this time. So there should be a link again in the description for the form to fill in to join that. The form, I think, is self-explanatory and contains all the other details that you would need. But just suffice it to say, the last 2 years when I've done the weekend retreat, it has been a genuinely special time. The people who I met on the weekend retreat are, it's silly to say, but it's cool seeing people commenting in chat with a username or joining the Discord or whatever. It's a very different thing to meet somebody in person and recognize, like, it's an actual human being, and you share with them for just a few days, and yeah, you really like it. In a way, it still feels very visceral and significant. Even the first weekend retreat, and the same for last year as well. That little group that formed, and some of them had, a lot of Christian background. Some of them, this was all very new to them. But just for that little bit of time to take some time out of life for a bit of Bible study, a little bit of singing some Christian songs, and then like playing some games. The classic one that we do is, that what is it called? Would I Lie to You? That's become a classic where I ask people for stories of funny things that have happened to them, and then half the people I give them their actual story, and half of them I make up a story, and then we just have a hilarious time of trying to. It's basically like, imagine the Gauntlet, but 10 times more fun and in person. So that's always a highlight. But yeah, for some people, they've told me that the weekend has actually been really significant in their journey of faith. So I think
sign up.
Seriously consider coming along to the weekend retreat. Pray about it. I can if you've got questions, I can answer them. I can put you in touch with people who've come previous years. It's just it's the most real, and therefore in some ways the most important thing that has come out of all the stuff that I've done over the last few years on all these various YouTube and Discord adventures, is the weekend retreat. And I think God's really been at work through it. And, I've been blessed enough to be able to be a part of that work that he's doing amongst us. So there you go. There's my plug for the weekend retreat. Pharaoh, are you still there and audible?
I am, sorry, yes. That all sounds really cool.
I can't hear you. No.
Okay.
Right. I'm gonna give you another 20 seconds while I turn my microphone off and on.
There's increasingly weird noises coming out of Luke's sound. So yeah, make sure you tune in.
Right, I'm back.
Oh, okay, you're back again. Let's just say goodnight. Let's just say goodnight now. Let's just get out of here.
Exactly. Good night, everybody, and good night, Pharaoh.
Goodbye.